everyone, it's Jack from Cultaholic.com, back again with another news video, hot off the heels of last night's The Horror Show at Extreme Rules, a show which really provided as many questions as it did answers. And hopefully in this news video we will be able to answer a few of those new questions that were thrown up by the event, as well as a few bits and pieces of news from elsewhere too. So, without any further ado, let's take a look at those lovely headlines. First of all, Vince McMahon is said to have changed a finish of one of the matches at last night's show at the very last minute. Next up, we have an update on the reason behind Apollo Crews' absence last night. And finally, a major name is apparently set to be written off of WWE TV. So yes, first of all, apparently, well, the big talking point coming out of Extreme Rules is the fact that apparently Vince McMahon personally changed one of the finishes of one of the matches. Yes, on Brian Alvarez and Dave Meltzer's review of the show on the Wrestling Observer Radio, Meltzer talked a little bit about what was supposed to happen. The match in question was the Raw Women's Championship match between Asuka and Sasha Banks, and Meltzer said Asuka was supposed to win the match and Vince changed his mind. I think it was the day of the show, but it was basically a last-minute change. He went on to say that he didn't personally know why the change was made, but speculated that it was because of the ratings on last week's Monday Night Raw, which were very low and which apparently flipped WWE out, made them panic a little bit. And if that is true, if that is the real reason, then that would at least explain why there was that weirdly ambiguous finish to what was otherwise a very good match. If you haven't seen the match and are wondering how it ended, basically the referee took a bump, he was completely out of it, and then Bayley, who was at ringside supporting Sasha, took the referee's shirt off, put it on herself, and counted the pinfall for Sasha, who then took the Raw Women's title, and they both celebrated and headed to the back. So there remains a lot of confusion, which will hopefully at least get a little bit cleared up on tonight's Raw, over who the Raw Women's Champion is. Is it still Asuka because the actual referee didn't count the finish, or are they just going to count it and now Sasha Banks is the Raw Women's Champion? It's a very weird one, isn't it? I guess the whole talk of the TV ratings thing would mean that WWE would in theory be hoping that people would tune in to tonight's Raw to see what on earth is going on. It's a strange one, and it's a shame in my opinion. A shame for two reasons. One, it was a really good match and I don't think it deserved such a screwy ending. And secondly as well, it's a shame for Asuka if this is the case and if her reign has been ended because of this apparent, this speculative panic over TV ratings, because if that is the case, I don't think you can blame Asuka. She really has been one of WWE's MVPs, as it were, of the lockdown era. She's been constantly entertaining on screen, and really trying very hard as well, all of the time, to basically cram as much in as she can. She's wrestling, she's doing guest commentary, she's doing promos, she's being a comedy character, she's being a serious figure. She's really done it all over the past few months. That was one of two big talking points coming out of Extreme Rules last night. The other being Apollo Crews. Of course, Apollo was scheduled to defend the United States Championship last night against MVP, and then MVP came out alongside Bobby Lashley and said, Apollo's not here, I've won by forfeit. And then he took the belt, the new one that he's had designed, and left and declared himself the United States Champion. And very similar to the situation with Sasha Banks and the Raw Women's Championship, nobody knows if this is actually the case. Commentary seemed to suggest that this is not true and that Apollo Crews is still the US Champion, but you don't really know, do you? I certainly don't. And again, that could be one of the reasons why they're expecting people to tune into Raw tomorrow night to find out who on earth the champions are on the red brand. But there was also a lot of speculation regarding the nature of Apollo's absence. A lot of people were wondering last night, myself included, whether Apollo Crews had somehow either been in contact with somebody with COVID-19 or perhaps even unfortunately, contracted it himself. Now, I don't know if that's the case. We don't know if he has it or not, however, as sensitively as you can say that. However, it seems as though Dave Meltzer is suggesting that the reason that he missed the match and the event was indeed because of COVID-19. That's a really strange one, isn't it? Because Meltzer there didn't really elaborate enough for my liking. He didn't say whether Apollo had it, he didn't say whether he'd just been in contact with somebody and was a risk and needed to isolate himself. But at the same time, I do understand, I guess, the need for privacy, and I suppose if Apollo doesn't want to reveal whether it's him or not, that's totally up to him, and I do think that everyone should respect that. But in terms of just trying to find out the reason why he wasn't there, everything seems a little bit vague, doesn't it? The kayfabe reason that WWE said is totally different, by the way. That's totally unrelated. They said he'd failed a physical test, a medical, in the build-up to the match on that day because of a beatdown that he sustained at the hands of MVP and Lashley last month. So to me, at least, this is just guesswork, but it seems as though they had this match in mind. They thought, we'll still advertise it for the show, but then if Apollo is not safe to be in the Performance Center, then all we can do really is have this excuse as a backup. That's just how it seems to me, but let me know what you think in the comments down below. It is a massive shame for Apollo, and if it is indeed the case, I would be very surprised if we saw him in person on Raw tonight. Hopefully, regardless of what's really going on with him, hopefully he is in a position whereby he can return to the ring as soon as possible. And now let's talk a little bit about Rey Mysterio, because one of last night's most eye-catching matches was the eye for an eye match between Rey Mysterio and Seth Rollins. And this is what happened in the match if you didn't see it. Basically, Rey Mysterio lost the match. Seth Rollins won, shoving his eye into the ring steps, and apparently Rey Mysterio's eye was fully extracted. WWE have since said, in kayfabe, of course, his eye didn't really come out, that there's still a chance that Rey could regain his sight and that medical staff are optimistic. Now, this apparently, according again to the Wrestling Observer, all ties in to Rey Mysterio's contract, the weird ambiguous finish of this match, or the aftermath, I suppose. The finish was quite conclusive, but the ambiguous aftermath regarding whether Rey will be able to wrestle again or not, that all seems to stem from his current contract status with WWE. So let's take a look at that now. Now, it was reported earlier this month that Rey Mysterio was working without a contract with WWE, and I think that might suggest, that might be the reason why he didn't actually win this match. They also might have just always wanted Seth to win the match. However, apparently, the reason that it's been left open-ended whether he'll return or not is because, according to the Wrestling Observer, Mysterio has still not re-signed a contract with WWE. Now, you may be wondering, well, if Rey Mysterio is not going to re-sign a contract and is probably leaving, then why did they keep a return for him open-ended at the end of that match? Well, I think the reason for that is basically what was summed up by Dave Meltzer, who says that his gut suggests that Rey probably will sign a new deal, but just hasn't done so yet. So with that in mind, you can kind of see why they went this route, where they went with Rey losing the match, but then possibly being able to return, but maybe not being able to return, because in truth, the contract is still up in the air and we don't know what's going on with Rey. However, what I can't work out is why they did that stipulation in the bloody first place. So it seems as though Rey could potentially be written off for a while, or he could be brought back for a while. It all depends what happens. However, reports have emerged about a certain major name in WWE who is apparently about to be written off TV properly. And if we head to WrestlingNews.co, they are saying that a source has told them from WWE that the person in question is the Nature Boy, Ric Flair. Now, a lot of eyebrows were raised when Ric Flair was brought back, because currently, at the time, with the lockdown and everything, and certain vulnerable or older people being encouraged to isolate and shield and stay away from everybody, Ric Flair is surely one of the last people you'd want in a crowded environment. Well, according to WrestlingNews.co, everybody around Flair in the Performance Center is being encouraged to be kept as safe as possible, or to keep him also as safe as possible, and to take every possible precaution. But it is still a weird one, isn't it? Because obviously the ultimate way to keep him safe would just to not have him be there at all. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the reasons why Flair was brought back in the first place and became a figure on our screens once again. Because if you haven't been following Raw, Flair has kind of been acting as sort of a pseudo-manager to his old stablemate Randy Orton during Orton's feud with Edge, and now Orton's feud with The Big Show, and Flair's been kind of getting involved as well and acting often as a mouthpiece for Randall. And apparently the reason for this, for bringing Flair back, it all goes back once again to ratings. Vince apparently, again according to WrestlingNews.co's source, Vince really wanted to bring big star names back in order to help boost the ratings a little bit. I would suggest, given the figures we've viewed in the past few weeks, that has not particularly been successful. However, apparently it was known to everybody involved that when Flair was being brought back, it was always going to be a temporary measure. And now, apparently, he is going to be written off TV very soon. That could be tonight, we don't know. But tonight, of course, Randy Orton is in action. He'll be taking on The Big Show in a no DQ match which he requested for the night after Extreme Rules. And apparently, again, this match was not on the pay-per-view itself because they want to boost Raw. They want a big match on Raw to encourage more people to tune in. So very intriguing stuff there, but hopefully, once Flair is written out and he's off and hopefully isolating again, everything's fine and it was a risk that didn't lead to anything bad happening. I mean, we all hope that anyway. So I'm glad that everybody's been taking their precautions around Ric Flair, but at the same time, maybe just leave him at home. And finally, let's end talking a little bit about AEW, because those of you who follow AEW will have seen that on last week's show, Orange Cassidy got a measure of revenge on the man who's been tormenting him recently, Chris Jericho, because he somehow rigged a big prank up in Daly's place and allowed a load of orange juice to fall from the ceiling onto the inner circle in the ring. And on his weekly Saturday night special YouTube show, Jericho gave some insider details on the initial incident, the initial idea. It was a little bit different from his original vision, and he explains why. Jericho claims that it was his idea, the whole spot, and said that he got the idea from the bloodbaths that they used to do in WWF in the 90s with the Brood, Gangrel, Edge and Christian. But apparently this idea was actually the second idea that Jericho had, and the first one was more similar to Kurt Angle's milk truck or Austin's beer truck, where he wanted Orange Cassidy to drive an orange juice truck into Daly's place and spray down the heels in the ring with orange juice. It would have been a legendary segment, and I'm sad it didn't happen. However, Jericho did point out that there was a logistical reason behind this. He said, but if you see at Daly's place, whenever they have cars come in, such as Cody trying to drive in one time and FTR driving in these days, you can only get to a certain area and then you have to stop. So you couldn't get a whole orange juice truck in, even if there is such a thing, he points out. But I'm sure we could have made one and we would have sprayed orange juice, and he would have sprayed orange juice on us. It's sad that it didn't happen, but at least they found a viable alternative. Jericho also said that he was quite scared or a little bit apprehensive because there was a bit of a mistake with the X marks the spot place where he had to stand in the middle of the ring, and he just had to kind of guess because he was there for rehearsals earlier in the day, and he said that when the orange juice came down, it did hit them hard. But it did make for a very entertaining segment, and it just, I think, continues to show that Chris Jericho really does have a creative mind for the business, and I'm really intrigued, and we could be looking at like years in the future from now, but I'm really intrigued to see what Jericho would get up to once he'd stepped away from in-ring competition, because you can't imagine that he'll just leave wrestling altogether, especially when he seems to love coming up with new ideas all the time. But that is it for today's second news video. Check out Tom's earlier today if you haven't seen it already, and all of our coverage from last night's Extreme Rules. Thank you once again for watching this video. I've been Jack. Leave your thoughts and opinions in the comments section down below. Stay safe out there, keep yourselves positive, and I'll see you very soon.